My father raised me in a mountain cabin, claiming a supernatural plague had killed the rest of humanity in 2001. I called him a liar after sneaking out and finding civilization. I was wrong, and I shouldn't have gone outside. Part 1 backslash, Part 2 backslash, Part 3 backslash, Part 4 final. Tell the story again. Little me would always demand. Papa would always cave after a brief ping-pong match. No, to please, to fine. I always bested him in a contest of wills. His hangdog face told a tale of guilt for trapping me in a mountainside prison, its grotty window panes dressed with nailed wooden planks in lieu of curtains. My father's tale of the apocalypse, told dozens of times throughout my childhood, when as such. The plague came on a beautiful afternoon in mid-spring. Some argued against a plague label, for it wasn't a contagion. It wasn't a new virus or flu the WHO or CDC had neglected to warn us about. It was as sudden as rain, an April shower that struck all places at once. Nobody would ever really agree on the how or why of it. In a matter of days, there wouldn't be many left to argue about it at all. Across the world, at precisely 1 minute past 2 Greenwich Mean Time, 1/4 of humanity started screaming at something unseen and unheard by the rest of us. We were at the airport when it happened. You, your mama, and me. Folks used to travel places just for fun back then, Evie. Aluminium birds flew about on stiff wings, carrying us in their bellies. Sometimes I mistakenly believe I hear one soaring miles above our little cabin. I suppose I like to pretend. Anyhow, your mama squeezed you in her arms when the phenomenon began. Dozens of people around us, in synchronicity, clutched their temples with eyes closed as they shrieked at a piercing register. 1 minute past 2 in the afternoon, the papers and the televisions would say, while there were still papers and televisions. At the exact same moment in time, something had terrified 1/4 of the planet. When they stopped screaming, the soon-to-be-named affected persons were driven to acts of lunacy and horror. Folks threw themselves over balconies. Armed airport officers, affected and unaffected, opened fire on one another. A businessman bludgeoned a woman with his briefcase. A toddler bit clumps out of his father. The most unnerving part was they weren't angry. They seemed horrified by their own actions. The assailants sobbed, wailed, and apologized. They said they were just trying to quieten the voice. Something was talking to them, Evie, something your mama and I, and plenty of other people couldn't hear. Your mama and I ran for our lives. Past scenes of horror I shan't detail to you, little one. Cars were abandoned on streets. A plane plummeted from the sky. London burned around us, as every other city, town, and village burned across the globe. Then, at 1 minute past 3, came 2 billion cardiac arrests. The affected persons died of fright, after facing one final horror too great for their hearts to bear. 1/4 of humanity was gone, if not closer to half, given the violent ends met by so many unaffected victims. Many called it a supernatural event, given billions of corroborating stories about the voice torturing affected persons into acts of insanity. But scientists were determined to find a grounded explanation in medicine, technology, or our environment. A virus we didn't yet understand, biological warfare, or even mass psychosis akin to the 1518 dancing plague of Alsace. Even without a conclusive answer, I'm sure the world would have healed in time. But at 1 minute past 2 the following afternoon, and each afternoon onwards, the nightmare repeated. 1/4 of the world's surviving population was plagued by the voice and subsequently died of cardiac arrest. All modern infrastructure collapsed by day 3 or 4. Bands of unaffected savages and zealots ruled whatever remained. As I said, this was no virus, no matter how diligently scientists try to prove so. There was no quarantining or fleeing from it. It came for all people, no matter where they squirreled away. But that didn't stop you and me from trying. Papa always hesitated painfully at that part of the story. He never told me what happened to Mama, and I never asked. I knew she was gone. I knew it would hurt the two of us if I were to learn how. We fled to the Lake District, to this very hunting cabin. We drove past fires and fights and wreckages and things I won't ever tell you about, Evie. The last town we passed at the foot of this great mountain was in ruins and entirely devoid of life. That was all the confirmation I needed. The world was over. So I took us on the off-road dirt track up the mountain, expecting that any day at 1 minute past 2, you and I would be affected by the voice too. But something else happened as we drove up this mountain. Evie, the sun was setting, so it's hard to say what I saw appear in the dim orange of the day's last light, looming over the track. It looked like a rip, as if two threads in reality's tapestry had untethered to reveal the slimmest of openings. We were driving too quickly for me to swerve or stop in time. The car plowed through it, and the wound stretched to let us through. On the other side, the dirt track and the mountain continued upwards, but I knew everything was different. We had slung our bulky family sedan through a narrow needle eye, and when I looked in the rearview mirror, the rip in the air had disappeared. I wouldn't have believed it had happened if not for the inexplicable and unearthly events which had already transpired that week. I believe it was a doorway to God, little one. I believe he led us into his bubble of protection atop this mountain, far from the horrors of the world below. That's why we've lasted these many years without becoming affected. That's why we must respect his blessing. You mustn't ever leave this cabin, Evie. It isn't safe out there. I believe his story for many years because Papa was the only human being I had ever known. His worldview was reality to me. But as the years went by and I studied various books by various authors, I was exposed to different ideas and thoughts about reality, and I started to have my doubts. But I doubted everything, which hindered as much as it helped me. I was too frightened to go outside and learn the truth for myself. You see, Papa and I were naturally predisposed to anxiety. We would fret about contamination, morality, and the slightest out-of-place sound from the surrounding trees. My father explained that he had obsessive-compulsive disorder, and he was fairly certain, given its genetic component, I'd inherited it from him. Still, Papa tried to help me overcome my fears. He would tend to the vegetable patch behind the cabin and encourage me to sit on the back porch, watching and learning from him. See, you're getting to experience the outdoors, he would say, and that did help with my anxiety, with my agoraphobia, among millions of other phobias. In fact, the pendulum swung the other way, which hadn't been my father's plan. As I grew from child to a teenager, I decided that sniffing a little fresh air under the rear awning wasn't the same as properly going outsides. It wasn't the same as freedom. Despite my crippling fears, part of me was curious. I yearned for more than the cabin. And in the summer of 2018, while Papa was tending to the vegetables, I enacted my plan. Pretending to nip inside to use the bathroom, I instead tiptoed to the front door, unbolted the 11 latches, and broke free. The outdoors was different at the front of the property. I'd never felt it like that before, with shoes crinkling the grass, rather than creaking the wooden porch boards. If this story gave you chills, subscribe for more terrifying true stories every day.